Jones keeps, gets a block, takes off, and he is gone. Trying to stay upright, and he trips absolutely all alone, and he trips. Going to the end zone, and he ends up at Remember That Guy, the podcast where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players. I'm James, and I personally prefer it when my quarterback gets into the end zone rather than falling on his face. That's just me.
I gotta agree with you there, James. Diaz with you once again as the co-host, and we actually have an incredibly special guest for this episode. Here to explain why he fell over laughing when Daniel Jones fell down. Please introduce yourself, Mr. Special Guest.
That's right, it's me, the very special guest, Chris Collinsworth.
Such an honor to have you on, Mr. Collinsworth.
I gotta slide in from the left, and then, it'll be fine. Just kidding, it's me, Xavier. As much as I did enjoy Daniel Jones falling over, as a Jets fan, it's really hard to make fun of anyone else's quarterback making an oopsie when my quarterback ran into his own lineman's ass and fumbled the ball.
Jets fans should be more on this than anyone else. This is a play that if we had the not top 10, we've talked about how they had to retire that segment because of it. I think I might vote for Daniel Jones falling over completely untouched right short of the end zone over the butt fumble. I think you all need to really seize this, Jets fans. Don't ever let it die.
I'll take it up with the council.
It's tough because it was like the duality of Daniel Jones on display on that one play. Because you see, wow, incredible athletic gifts. Look at this breakaway speed. And then he remembered that he's Daniel Jones. And unfortunately, he falls before the end zone. Just truly the full spectrum of Daniel on display.
Damn, Daniel.
I was leaving that there hanging for you. I was waiting for it.
I'm never shy about taking low-hanging fruit.
Well, I mean, the same way that you crushed that low-hanging fruit, if I may start making memories.
Please.
Over the past week, Bryce Harper has made a habit of crushing those hanging breaking balls and all variety of pitch, as have the entire Phillies. Since this is a crazy maneuver, by the way, what I'm about to describe. What the Phillies did is they had an old fuck coach who hasn't won shit since 2009. And they said, let's get rid of him and let's see if it improves the team. And the Phillies have not lost a game since. So it's just been incredible to see ever since getting rid of Joe Girardi how, the entire team describes it. Like the mood in the locker room is just through the roof. Maybe because the current manager believes in playing young players and developing them and not being a standoffish dickhead. I don't know. It's who's to say what the secret is in the clubhouse right now? But the Phillies are cooking with some hot grease. 7 in a row right now. Currently up 1-0 on the Diamondbacks in their first game back home. Just on an incredible streak. And Daryl Morey, if you're listening, because I know you spend a lot of time listening to the podcast, I'm sorry that if you listen to ours on 2x speed, because I already talk pretty fast. It's got to be pretty tough for you to listen to. But if you are listening, fire Doc. Because look at how firing Joe has turned around the Phillies. It's been beautiful.
You missed the window to trade Doc to the Lakers. You have to just cut him now. Like, you had a moment where there was some value, but it's too late.
I think, unfortunately, the Lakers thing, I don't know that it ever really had legs. I also think, here's the thing, he's going to be back, that whole rant aside, because the owners, I believe, are still paying Brett Brown this year, and Doc has 3 years left on his deal. So that was why the trade was, could have been the golden ticket, because you get off the rest of the contract, you don't owe him any money, and you get rid of him. Josh Harris, I don't know how much you both, or you, the listeners at home, know about Josh Harris, but he's a rich dickhead. And he's not going to spend $8 million a year on a guy that's no coaching his team if he doesn't have to. So it's unfortunate, but I do think we're stuck with them. But thankfully, we have the Phillies, and what a beautiful summer it's going to be. What a beautiful summer it's going to be.
Man, when was the last time the Phillies picked up the spirits of the city?
I think our freshman year at Temple. 2011. That was
go.
The last time we made the playoffs.
And then, to be frank, they dropped it pretty damn low during that freshman year also.
I'll never get over how perfectly, horrifically metaphorical it was that Ryan Howard blows out his Achilles to end that Game 5, and we haven't been to the playoffs since. It's just absolute worst irony ever, straight to the face.
Well, let's move on from that negativity, because you know who I am absolutely thrilled to tell you all about Abby Lampy. It is completely understandable if you all are not familiar with the name Abby Lampy. She is not a well-known athlete. However, she is a 21-year-old from North Carolina State University, and she had some plans during her college time to study abroad. Unfortunately, COVID upended those. But this summer, she finally has gotten the chance to kind of make up for that. While she was there, Abby Lampy, while on North Carolina State University's campus, has already participated in one silly food-based race. They have the Krispy Kreme Challenge at NCSU. This is a 5-mile run to a Krispy Kreme location near the campus where you eat a dozen donuts, then run 5 miles back. So Abby Lampy's already... Yeah, I would not recommend that, personally. I'm never going to try and do that, but Abby Lampy is stronger than us, because she has conquered that. So when she went to Europe, she's mostly staying in Spain. There was one thing, though, that she had to do. She had to hop real quick to England, specifically to Gloucestershire. Gloucestershire is a place where they make a very particular semi-hard cheese, and for 600 years, once a year, they have the cheese race. This is a race where what they do is they take one of these wheels of cheese, and they roll it down a 200-foot hill. It is a very steep, grassy hill. And after the cheese gets a 1-second head start, everyone else runs down the hill after it. There are many injuries. Some people have died. Again, it's been going on for 6 centuries. Frankly, many people have died at this point. And if you watch it, so here's my favorite thing. I did watch this. Please, go look it up if you can. People are when they get towards the end, it's steep enough that they'll just kind of jump and flop 20 feet down the hill at a time and then kind of get up. Some people try running the whole time. Some just go straight into rolling. Abby Lampy, however, this 21-year-old out of North Carolina State University, never been there before, came and won this race. Let me go ahead and put it in her words.
My name's Abby Lampy. Where are you from? I'm from North Carolina.
Oh, what brings you here?
Yeah, the cheese race.
She wins the cheese wheel. That is one of the things that you get as a prize. You also get a small cash prize. But she wins the cheese wheel. Apparently it costs $20 for her to ship it from Gloucestershire back to her parents' home, which is the only way that she could handle this cheese that she now had while she was abroad. They'll be enjoying it.
Is it the cheese that they roll down the hill?
Yes.
So it's all
no.
disgusting?
Well, it's got a rind. It's a semi-hard and a rind, Xavier. They're not going to eat the outside of the cheese. But when she returns from her sojourn here in Europe, she's going back to Spain now, she and her family will get to enjoy this beautiful cheese wheel that she won, god damn it. So that's Abby Lampy for you, making memories for me.
So the only thing I can think of whenever any kind of food-based thing comes up on this podcast, I think of 2 things. First of all, Molly Schuyler will probably absolutely devour that cheese in
2 bites.
What would we give her?
2 bites.
And then my other thought is that if our friend Xavier here, our special guest, ever were to participate in this race, he would potentially be able to die both during and then even if he won it, if he had to be stuck in a room with all that cheese as well. It would be
double death. I'll take it.
Horrible. Horrible on your outsides and your insides.
Please do watch this race if you get a chance. I'll go ahead and send you guys a video later, but I couldn't do it this week because I had to save it to be able to tell you about the beautiful cheese race now. It was, and actually I'll say real quick, I said it's been going on for 600 years. They had to take 2 years off due to COVID. This was the first year since the pandemic that the cheese race returned. All the more fanfare for our girl Abby Lampy.
Story is neither cheesy nor corny.
Well, Xavier, we got Diaz, we got me. What about you? Who's making memories right now?
So, obviously I got to start off first of all by saying, fuck Andre Palat. He was on the 2014-15 Lightning team that beat the Rangers in the conference finals last time they were good. And now he's back to break my heart yet again. Game 3, trying for a 3-0 series lead. Rangers leading the whole way. And Palat scores with 40 seconds left. First time Rangers trailed the entire game and they lose. Game 5 last night, Rangers either leading or tied the whole way. Andre Palat, again, scoring in the last minute and a half to win the game. Andre Palat single-handedly breaking my heart again, but Rangers were down 3-2 to the Penguins. They were down 3-2 to the Hurricanes. They're down 3-2 now. Still a chance. Regardless, it's been a great season for them. Other than that, Yankees have the best record in baseball by 4 games. And the AL East has 4 teams that are all over 500, including, if the season ended right now, they would have every single wildcard team. So 4 of the 6 American League teams would be the AL East.
I wonder how that 5th team's doing.
They're better than every other last place team except for the Colorado Rockies. So, the fact that the Orioles are where they are in the only division with 4 teams over 500 is actually pretty impressive.
Scrappy.
The other thing that I want to talk about was update from last week. The Oklahoma Juggernaut did lose 1 game to UCLA, but then they came back and run-ruled UCLA 15-0 in the very next game with Jocelyn Alo hitting another 2 home runs. They then went to the Women's College World Series against Texas, where they would have run-ruled Texas 16-1 in the first game, but they don't allow run rules in the final. Jocelyn Alo hit another 2 home runs, and then they won the second game 10-5, cementing their juggernaut with another title and just crushing the hopes of the state of Texas.
Real quick, what was it like being in Texas as that happened? Like, was there a general sense of deflation? Did people have hope against Oklahoma, or did they just know from the beginning, oh shit, here it goes?
You know what? I think San Antonio doesn't care much about people from Austin. I think there's a bit of a rivalry there. So where I was at, didn't really see much about the University of Texas. But who knows? Maybe they were all happy to see their hated neighbor go down.
Texas is big enough to have those kinds of little intrastate rivalries. All I can think is, what a horrible year to be a Longhorn. I guess I wouldn't even say horrible, because you can't say it's horrible if you make it to the championship. But in the Red River Shootout during college football season, Texas was up, 31 points at one point, and blows that game to Oklahoma. And then you get to go against the most dominant team probably in all of college athletics right now. I would think it's fair to say.
Yeah, it's a question of, do they beat the peak UConn teams, I think, at this point, or the peak UCLA teams.
Right. I mean, yeah, we're Wooden's UCLA, Auriemma's UConn, and now the Jocelyn Alo-powered Sooners. Incredible dominance. So sorry, Texas. Oklahoma apparently can mess with Texas.
Texas's men's baseball team is also in the Super Regionals against ECU, and they lost game 1 today, 13-7. During the game, their outfielders collided into each other and let a ball bounce off of them and then over the wall for a home run. So, not a great time for Texas. They're making it far, but things not going great for them when they get there. But any place that's 104 degrees during the day deserves to not do that well, because it really should not exist as a place. But speaking of Texas, while dying in the 104-degree heat of San Antonio, got me thinking about what we should talk about this week. And so, to honor this state that I hated being in, I wanted to talk about great Texas guys. And the person that I want to talk about is John Sherman Rutherford III, a.k.a. Lone Star JR.
Never heard of him before. That's a fucking great name, though.
It's a great nickname. Anytime I hear JR, I can only think Jim Ross, who's, of course, another famous Oklahoman. But please, I need to hear more.
Well, this JR is Johnny Rutherford. So, Johnny Rutherford, despite the Lone Star nickname, was actually born March 12, 1938, in Coffeyville, Kansas, which is on the border with Oklahoma. But he did then move to Texas at a very early age, where he spent most of his time. He begins racing professionally in 1959, driving modified stock cars at the Devil's Bowl Speedway in Mesquite, Texas, which is right outside Dallas, and still exists. In 1961, he joins the International Motor Contest Association, and then later joins the U.S. Auto Club. We've talked about this a bit before. Names for the associations that were governing racing in the U.S. change up a lot in the 50s, 60s, 70s. So if you get confused, go back and listen to some of our earlier episodes. On this circuit, Rutherford earns the nickname Lone Star JR due to both his Texas origins and due to the giant Texas flag he painted on top of his helmets. On February 22nd, 1963, Rutherford wins one of the Daytona 500 qualifying duels, which at that point was considered a full race. And that's his first ever NASCAR race, and he wins, becoming the youngest ever duel winner and one of the youngest drivers ever to win in NASCAR history. However, after a ninth place finish in the Daytona 500, he decided that stock cars weren't really what he wanted to do, and he wanted to focus on open wheel racing. So later that year, he makes his first start in the Indianapolis 500. Doesn't finish, though, due to a transmission issue, but now he's full in on open-wheeled cars. 1964, he's back at the Indy 500. And this year, he's part of a massive crash that goes on to change the sport completely. On the second lap of the race, Dave McDonald spins and hits the inside wall. His car explodes, setting on fire, and spins back towards the outside wall. The driver by the name of Eddie Sachs tried slipping through the car and in the outside wall, but hits him head on, and his car explodes. Rutherford somehow manages to slip between both of these two exploding cars in the wall, but had gotten so close that a lemon that Eddie Sachs used to wear around his neck on a string ended up being found in Rutherford's engine compartment after the race was over.
That's the most CGI'd action driving scene I've ever heard described to me. That's a portion of the movie Speed Racer by the Wachowski siblings that you just described to me, Xavier.
We have to ask the question. Is this the origin of calling a piece of shit car a lemon?
It'd be great if it was, but we can pretend that it was.
In the Guy universe, that's the reason for that now.
This was very bad. After this race, the USAC decided they had to make some changes due to media pressure. So they mandated that cars carry less fuel because at this point there wasn't really a fueling up. It was just keep as much fuel on you as you can. And they improved some fuel cell technologies using the kind that military helicopters used. And they switched from gasoline to methanol in order to avoid similar explosions. Again, racing is very dangerous. People are dying a lot. So at this point, they're trying to do what they can to fix it.
For the record, because I don't think you actually said one way or the other, did these other two, besides JR, survive?
They both died. So he survives, but the other two do pass away, hence the trying to switch things to make them safer. Can't just have multiple people dying in giant explosions during your marquee race. But so, Rutherford keeps racing. After nearly 40 attempts, he finally wins his first race, the Atlanta Championship in 1965. During this time, though, he earns an alternative nickname, Wreckiford, because he was much more likely to crash than to finish a race. This comes back to haunt him, as on April 3rd, 1966, he suffers a serious crash at the Eldora Speedway in Ohio. His car completely flips out of the track. So, up over the fence, out of the track.
Into the stands?
Well, so it was
That's a nice
into
souvenir
grass.
for a lucky fan.
It ended up on grass. But he suffers 2 broken arms, broken fingers, and a head injury. That means he has to sit out the entire USAC season. So he has to spend a lot of time recovering. He comes back, but over the next 6 seasons, he bounces around with 8 different teams, doesn't record a single victory. He also fails to finish every single Indy 500 he's entered with 9 consecutive DNFs. For one reason or the other, he's never able to finish them.
I'm very impressed by the dedication to sticking to this form of racing versus the other one where in your first try you won. And here you didn't win for 40-something tries and almost never finish.
Yeah, you would think that he does do a little bit of stock car racing, on the side. Not anything ever full-time. He does run a couple of the Daytona 500s. But that Eldora crash was actually in a stock car while he was just doing a side race. So he does have some issues crashing in the stock cars as well. Despite all this, 1972 comes around. He ends up finishing with 5 straight top 10 finishes and catches the eye of Team McLaren. And so McLaren signs him for the 1973 season. This is his best season yet. He finishes 3rd overall in points picks up his first wins in 8 years, winning both at Ontario and at Michigan. And he finally finished the Indy 500, although it was a 9th place finish in a rain-shortened event. So still counts as a finish, even if he didn't get to go across that finish line in the car itself.
That's what we call a moral victory.
And, that moral victory is going to lead to some better stuff. The 1974 season starts off a bit poorly as JR finishes 27th at Ontario and outside the top 5 at both Phoenix and Trenton for a blown engine during qualifying left him starting 25th for the Indy 500 on the 9th line out of 11. Due to a fuel crisis and fallout from the death of Swede Savage during the 73 race, the lead into the Indy 500 was shortened greatly with reduced track time for practices and also new safety rules that were introduced to try to reduce speed. So it's kind of a weird week for the Indy 500. But on race day, Rutherford's car issues non-existent. It only took him 23 laps to move up from 25th all the way to 3rd. And if you know anything about IndyCar racing, it's not easy to pass people for the most part. So moving 22 spots up in just 23 laps is pretty incredible. So ends up battling with AJ Foyt and Bobby Unser, and he's able to take the lead for the first time on lap 65. The three battle back and forth, each trading first, second, and third for the next couple hours. Rutherford holds on and leads the final 24 laps to win his first Indianapolis 500. His starting position of 25th was the furthest back anyone had ever won since 1936.
Didn't realize the Indianapolis 500 had been gone since 1936. Wow.
It's been going on for a while. Immediately after the checkered flag was waved, fans streamed onto the active track, forcing stewards to halt the race immediately instead of allowing lap drivers to complete the course as had previously been custom. So at this point, they used to let everyone else keep going for 5 minutes to see who can finish. And before that, it was even, they just kept letting people go for longer to let finish. But they had to just stop everyone now. And starting after that race, they said, okay, if you're on the last lap, you can finish, but otherwise, no more just letting people keep going for, an undetermined amount of time. All because these fans ran onto the track after he won.
That just seems insane, period. I get a good court storming. I love it. Take down the goalposts. Maybe that's a little dangerous, but I'm still on board.
Yeah, there's no cars there.
You couldn't pay me enough to, do that shit on, I-95. Let alone a professional fucking track where they're going 2-3 times the speed as they are on a highway. That's absolutely batshit insane.
That dodgeball scene. If you can dodge traffic, you can dodge a ball.
Holy hell.
Rutherford continues to race for McLaren after a somewhat down 1975. His 1976 season, it's his best yet. He ends up finishing second in points standings for the whole season, losing out to Gordon Johncock by just 20 points. 4,240 to 4,220. I wish I could find more information on Gordon Johncock because that's an awesome name. He does win 3 more races, including a second rain-shortened Indy 500, where he gets awarded the victory 2 hours after they had stopped due to rain. And he walks to victory lane on foot because the car had been put away to protect it from the elements. As of today, this is still the shortest Indy 500 on record. They had only just completed 102 laps out of 200, so it was technically only the Indy 255.
I was trying to do the number, 255. It sounds about right. Did the
Yeah.
fans get the 50% back on the ticket? I mean, that seems kind of like a ripoff.
Well, they got those they got the 2 hours that would have been, race time, sitting in the rain. So, they got the full length of time that it should have taken. I doubt the Brickyard organizers were going to give them any money back.
The ticket was probably 10 cents back then anyway.
In 1977, Rutherford goes to Australia to compete in the Bathurst 1000. That's in kilometers, so it was actually 600 miles, which is a touring car race on a public course that is carved into the side of a mountain. This is a very dangerous course because there are houses here and there is just regular traffic that needs to get in. And it's, again, on a mountain that
This is Mad
changes
Max.
in
This
elevation.
is amazing. Hell yes. Australia got it, dude. Australia figured it out. Also, to be very pedantic, if it's 1,000 kilometers, it's 620 miles.
Well, tell that to the internet. This is a two-person race because of the length, and so he teams up with Janet Guthrie, who earlier that year had become the first woman to qualify for the Indy 500. And despite being the only Americans there out of the 60 teams and having to drive a car with a steering wheel on the other side, they did qualify 26th out of 60.
They're not allowed to use. You can't even use like an identical American car in the Australian competition.
No, they had to drive with the steering wheel on the right side.
Brutal.
And so they qualified 26th out of 60 over multiple Australian teams that know how to drive those cars.
That seems insane. Can we stop for a moment? Because like this to me is like if they went to Bryce Harper and said, "Sorry, man, you got to bat right-handed now. You just have to," and he just doesn't fall off like much of at all.
It's more like telling him to do that, but also saying, "Hey, we're also putting spikes next to the batter's box, so if you fuck up, you might kill yourself because this is a more dangerous course than any that you've done previously." Because passing anyone on a open wheel course is difficult, Rutherford does crash 8 laps in while trying to lap a slower car. They try to fix it. They run a couple more laps, but it's pretty much done. So don't even really get a chance to go through it. Perils of trying to pass a car on a giant mountain road. But at least he's alive, and that's not something that everybody could say for racing in the 60s and 70s. After this, goes back to America, and if you remember past episodes of this show, there's about to be a split in auto racing, where the USAC and CART break apart, with CART controlling most open wheel races and the USAC controlling the Indy 500. So it's a very weird dynamic, as I've talked about previously. So Rutherford wins the first 2 races in the inaugural CART season of the 1979 season, finishes 4th overall. But McLaren is getting out of the American scene to go focus on F1. So Rutherford needs a new team. He signs on with Chaparral, and he dominates. Now age 42, Rutherford starts off the season by winning the pole at the Datsun Twin 200 at Ontario, and then winning the race. And then he wins the pole for the 1980 Indy 500. On race day, Rutherford and his yellow submarine car, which is so named for the bright yellow Pennzoil paint job, blow everybody out of the water. They lead for 118 out of 200 laps and wins by 30 seconds. He passes the finish line and no one is even close to him. They just got to keep waiting for everyone else. Only 2 other drivers even finished on the same lap by the time that he was done. And in a very cool and iconic moment, after he finishes, he's going to pit row, and he sees this rookie whose name is Tim Richmond, who he had become kind of friends with over the past couple weeks, who ran out of fuel right at pit row. And so he stops, and he waves over to Richmond, and Richmond said, "Did you win?" And he said, "Yeah, get on." And so Richmond comes over, jumps onto the car, and lays down on the car while Rutherford decides to drive down pit row. And so they're driving down pit row together. Richmond just laying on the car, just slapping his back and celebrating him.
This also seems deranged.
A lot of people
possibly
are way too comfortable putting their bodies in front of and on cars.
I mean, at this point, he's not going too fast. It's pit row, and the race is already over. Rutherford goes on to either finish first or second at 7 of the next 8 races. Wins at Mid-Ohio, Michigan, and Milwaukee, and he cruises to his first ever points championship with 4,723 points, which is a full 1,000 more than second-place Bobby Unser. He does have a bit of a callback to his early career, as in the last race at Phoenix. He does flip his car and land on his head. It's actually a pretty brutal crash. He was interviewed about it later and showed like his helmet where you could see all the paint was rubbed off because it's pinned against the ground. He's okay, despite, again, being upside down. And he does get to celebrate his championship. But, you can't take the crash out of the guy. This ends up being the peak of Rutherford's career. continues to compete for a couple more years. 1986, he wins the Michigan 500 at the age of 48, which is a record that still stands today for the oldest winner of a 500-mile race. Overall, he won 27 USAC/kart races, with 26 of them coming after he turned 35 years old. And he qualified for 24 Indy 500s, winning 3 of them, which is tied for 5th most of all time. After he retired from full-time racing, became a television and radio analyst. Also spent time as a pace car driver and a driving coach. And he was inducted into the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame in 87, the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame in 95, and both the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America and the International Motorsports Hall of Fame in 1996.
Pace car driver sounds like a super sick job for like an ex-race car driver.
You get to be out there with everybody else.
Yeah,
just didn't have to go off.
Oh my god, that sounds like the fucking dream.
Small fun facts. He actually met his wife Betty at the first Indy 500 he did back in 1963, and they would go on to be married for over 50 years. He says he saw her before his first practice, then crashed the car, had to get taken by an ambulance, and afterwards came back and saw her again and said, "Hey, I think I've seen you somewhere before," which I think is pretty great to do after you've just crashed a car and somehow are still okay. He also once flew his own P-51 Mustang and said that he would have loved to be a fighter pilot if he wasn't in racing. So this guy just likes to go fast, whether on land or air. He also enjoys cutting horse competitions, which is a rodeo thing where you use a horse to try to separate a single cow from a herd and then try to keep that cow from getting back to its friends, which I think is hilarious.
I mean, obviously that would have like made sense to do as cowboys having to herd cattle and whatnot. It does seem a little bit purposefully mean now without that kind of real world need behind it.
Just upsetting one single cow.
What they call it horse cutting, it's cow bullying. It's cow erasure, it's cow discrimination. It's very anti-bovine of them is really what it comes down to. Bovinist. They're very bovinist. There's chauvinist, and then there's bovinist, and this is very bovinist.
I'll make sure I'll call the cutting horse competition and let them know how you feel.
Please do.
But that's the story of Lone Star JR.
Great. A late bloomer. Always a quick way to worm your way into my heart. That was phenomenal.
People that, if your profession, and granted, I guess all sports, there's a slight increase in the risk of death, but it's a somewhat significant factor when you're going 200 fucking miles an hour, and especially back then. These people running across the track and laying on top of cars in celebration. This is nuts. This is insane to me.
I do respect it. Yeah, because like football is scary. Football's not like a leading cause of death in the country the way cars are.
Exactly. And this is just like choosing to make a career of this.
You have to have a short memory if you're a driver, especially if you're going to crash as much as Johnny Rutherford.
I did some looking as you said this. I think I have an estimate on how many times he wrecked. Based on the good people over at champcarstats.com. In his professional races, he wrecked 54 times.
Yeah, and that's just professional races, not even like practice runs.
Yeah.
Imagine getting back into a car after 5 and then just saying, "No, I'm cool with this. 54, is that all?" Like, I thought it would have been a lot more than that.
I mean, that's the point where you're like, okay, these mean nothing to me anymore.
It's crazy. Just, race car drivers are a different breed.
Which I think is at least tangentially related to the sport that you'd like to dive into, James. Am I mistaken or no?
Yeah, no, I mean, different breeds all totally lead into what we're going on. So when Xavier mentioned Texas, I wanted to lock into something that just wasn't like a guy from Texas. I wanted to lock into Texas. And while rodeo is a very wide reach, both within the country and in the world, it, I think, definitely has a certain Texas feel to it. People very often will say that someone is the Michael Jordan in the sport. They're very quick to throw that around in bull riding. I have found at least 7 instances of different individuals in the sport being referred to as the Michael Jordan of bull riding. And, which one you're going to go with, it's anyone's pick. You could go with Bodacious, when retired, highest ever point average in all professional competition. You go with the person that supplanted Bodacious. Dillinger, still the record for most 50-point games. You go with any of the three that have won 3 consecutive titles. That would be, Bruiser, Bushwhacker, Little Yellow Jacket. You could go with arguably the most popular contestant in bull riding of all time, Chicken on a Chain, or the kind of granddaddy of them all, V61. If the names haven't given it away, I am talking about the bulls of bull riding. But all of these bulls, as I said, are Michael Jordans of the sport. I want to talk about a different kind of luminary. I want to go back to one of those for a moment. Dillinger. Dillinger has a calf. There's a guy in Texas, Robbie Harrington, brings this calf of Dillinger's who's not doing well, very unhealthy, brings it to this Dayton vet clinic in Dayton, Texas. And there's a woman named Marlene Henry. Marlene Henry takes his calf. She bottle feeds it every 5 hours for a couple weeks, brings it back to health. And just a little bit later, this calf promptly thanks her by going in and impregnating a bunch of her calves. He impregnates a bunch of them. A couple months later, she finds herself with 4 heifers now, so female cows, but 4 heifers with the lineage champion, Dillinger. And she's only ever raised cows at this point. But she says, we've got this pedigree. So she gets a friend of hers that's a breeder. And they bring in, to breed with one of these heifers from Dillinger, the 2006 PBR world finalist, Mighty Mouse. So Mighty Mouse and this calf are going to be the parents of our athlete. But real quick, before we get back to the athlete, since we talked about how a bull was a PBR world finalist, I'd like to explain how that works. Professional bull riding with all lowercase letters has existed back to the ancient Grecian times with the Minoan culture in Minos. They have frescoes of people leaping over bulls. Minotaur comes from Minos and Taurus, the root for bull. The frescoes are at the Palace of Knossos, which is theoretically the labyrinth. I can get all art historical about it, but basically, people have been fucking with bulls forever. Specifically, in the 1600s is when people started kind of doing what we now consider rodeo sports in the greater American continent. In 1992, capital PBR professional bull riding comes about. There had been 20 riders who were all pros under the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association. That's the FIFA governing body. And they're all right, we are now going to make the major league for this. So PBR has existed since then. It has a couple different flights. The top flight was initially called the Bud Light Cup Series. It is today called the Unleash the Beast Series as part of their sponsorship with Monster. But for all of the time that we're going to be concerned with, it was the Built Ford Tough Series, or BFTS. So in the Built Ford Tough Series, the way scoring works is a ride is worth a grand total of 100 points. The rider gets 50 points. The bull also gets scored for 50 points. There are 4 total judges, 2 judges for the bull and 2 judges for the rider. One thing I like that I want to point out, all judges must have professionally ridden in the rodeo at some point. So all judges know what they're talking about. What you have to do as a rider is, first off, you have to last the full round. Do either of you know how long a round of bull riding goes? How long a rider has to last to get his points?
3 minutes.
Isn't it 10 seconds?
It's 8 seconds. 8 seconds.
Christ.
You have to last 8 seconds on a bull, and if you get the 8 seconds, you're going to get a score. The bull gets a score no matter what. The way the rider gets a score is they have to safely stay on with only one hand. That is another specific thing. The bulls are outfitted with a rope right around their shoulders, and you can grip onto it with the other one. But that's why, you have the image of the Bronco Buster whipping up the hat with the other free hand. That hand has to remain free and cannot come in contact with the bull. So you got to hold on with that one gripping arm and then just stay on the bull for 8 seconds. So you'll be graded as a rider on just how well you do that, what your form is. The bull is being graded basically on how good of a job it's doing at beating your ass. The bulls are graded to kind of judge their own performance because the top flight is the 35 top riders and the 35 top bulls. The bulls are being graded, and when you get to the World Championships, they only want the very best bulls. Because for one, they want to make sure that the championship riders can get a high score. They need a well-scoring bull in order to get a high score. And also, they want it to be the best competition. That is how you have bulls that are World Cup finalists, like Mighty Mouse. And so now we have Mighty Mouse mating with this heifer, and we get their calf named 81. The calf will be named something later, but the reason that some of these calves and some of these bulls have numbers as their names is because that's their branding number. They don't all get names at first. And this one was the number of Dillinger. So Marlene Henry's thinking, all right, this is going to be my good luck charm for my bull. branding is used for people who have a lot of bulls to identify a bull. Marlene Henry only has this one bull. She's just a recreational rancher, has all these cows in this one bull that she loves very much. She and 81 have a very nice relationship. But eventually, some of her friends that are stock contractors who have huge herds and pick from them the very best ones for competition, they see old 81 thrashing about in the paddocks one day. They say, hey, I know you're busy all the time, but I'm going up to this competition anyway. I'll give 81 a spot in the trailer if you want to go. She says, sure. After my shift, I'll come up and watch. It'll be great. During her shift, she gets a call. Look, we need to name it something. They're not letting us say 81. And so she names him after Mighty Mouse. Mickey Mouse. So we've got Mickey Mouse now. He does not stay Mickey Mouse very long. They have a competition very shortly after this in Anaheim, where they're politely asked by the bull rider, not by Disney, they're asked preemptively, so that Disney won't ask them, do you know what they change it to? Mick E. Mouse. Like Chuck E. Cheese.
I would still sue them if I was Disney. I would do that anyway.
That's anti-Irish discrimination if you do that.
Yeah, Disney does not sue them. They get away with this, and the reason that he gets from this first competition all the way to him, because Mick immediately is a beast. To kind of give some context to the size of bulls. Minimum, we're talking 1,500 pounds. There's no bull at any level of competition that's under 1,500 pounds. Average, probably about 1,700. He's pushing 1,900 right now at the start. Just grew up, built. This is before any formal training. This is just a raw athletic product. The athleticism is off the It is like Aaron Donald and Myles Garrett, what he's doing. The shimmy shakes that he has, some of these shoulder rolls. One of the big differences between bull riding versus bronco riding, which are the two competitive ridings on the rodeo circuit. A horse goes up and down, tries and buck you off like that. A bull can get in the air and still have enough power in its body to torque back and forth while free-floating in the air to try and wrench you free. And Mick is one of the very best to do it. First off, I should mention there are a lot of stock contractors that are trying to say, hey, you've only got this one bull. Let us take him off your hands. No, Marlene Henry loves this bull. She's not letting Mickey Mouse out of her sight. She eventually, on her own, gets him submitted to ABBI, which is the American Bucking Bull Incorporated. It's basically, it's the registry of all bucking bulls. That's how they're referred to. They are all bucking bulls, and you have to be in this registry in order to be able to compete. It's also eventually how they end up studying them out and tracking the genealogy. That allows him to compete a little bit in his rookie season. He's mostly starting at some of the lower leagues, but in 2012, she sends a message to the PVR livestock director, Cody Lambert. I know that this is supposedly a fair draw, but since registered, we have not been drawn once for the upper leagues despite his performance at the lower leagues. You put him up there one time and he doesn't succeed, you will never hear from me again. And so in May of 2012, gets his call to the big time. It's the Pueblo Invitational in Pueblo, Colorado. He's originally set to face a guy out of Brazil, Marco Iguchi. That might sound strange, but actually Brazil is the second biggest country in terms of people with that as their background in professional rodeo competition overall. It is America, Brazil, and then a distant third, Australia. Australia has one world champion all time. Brazil has 12 of the 29 champions. All the remaining are US at that point. But there is a huge Brazilian rodeo culture. Even though Marco Iguchi is set up to compete against them, which would have been particularly nice because they already knew that he could beat Marco Iguchi having done that at a lower level competition. Marco Iguchi gets injured, and instead, he's going to face Silvano Alves of Brazil, who is at that time the reigning world champion. This is his first ever professional competition. He's got the world champ on his back. And out of the tube, he knocks him flat off his ass in 1.88 seconds. It is a dynamite rookie debut. That's how you come out the gate. It's basically if you were a hitter that homered off Jacob deGrom on your first pitch as your rookie debut. And this is only the beginning of better things. He finishes that 2012 season as the ABBI reserve champion, was by far the best at those lower levels, and he's now 5-0, having not yet been successfully tamed in any of his competitions at the BFTS, the Built for Tough Series level. He does make it to the World Finals. He does not make it to the final rankings of the World Finals this particular year. in the offseason, Marlene Henry does finally link up with a partner in training because she now knows, all right, we've got something here, but I need someone who knows what they're doing a little bit more to help unlock him. I'm not selling the bull, but we are going to move him to Kevin Ludemy's K&K Cattle Stock in Brownsboro, Texas. This is where Kevin Ludemy is basically going to become the third part of this trio now. Marlene Henry, the owner and surrogate mother of Mickey Mouse, her beautiful bull, and the trainer, Kevin Ludemy, gets up there. Mickey Mouse bulks up to a competition weight of 1,960 pounds, just short of a ton. And you know how people say, like, oh, this defensive player got a new move in the offseason? I wish I could watch enough bull riding to learn the intricacies when they talk about the moves that these bulls are learning in the offseason, because they talk about him coming into this 2013 like he just had a full new repertoire of attacks against riders, as he continues in this next year, extending his unbeaten streak to 17-0 all-time in Built Ford Tough Series competition. And another appearance in the World Finals against Podium. At this time, though, he is kind of behind two other bulls have just been around longer, or a little bit more established. Bushwhacker and Asteroid. There's a little bit of a shadow to escape, but people are excited. Mickey Mouse is like catching on. Part of the reason that Mickey Mouse is catching the attention of people is Marlene Henry, and this is her only bull. So she's down there in the stands with the fans, signing autographs, bringing people up to like nuzzle this very sweet bull afterwards, because he's very, very sweet in any of the videos you see where he's not in a ring. But the second you try and get on the back, he'll absolutely destroy you. We go into now the 2014 season. Going to have another undefeated season to start his career. Has not been successfully taken down once. 1 point, someone takes him to 7.47, but even then gets him down, and later that season beats that guy with a 2.65 time. So by the end of 2014, he has begun his career 28-0, and once again finishes on the podium of the World Cup finals, but finishes behind Asteroid and Bushwhacker. The good news is that 2014 was Bushwhacker's kind of retirement tour. That was when Bushwhacker was kind of getting feted on all the way out. Again, these bulls are treated like athletes. It's amazing. I watched so much rodeo competition this week, and the bulls get just as much of a write-up. In 2015, we've got a couple big accomplishments for him as he continues this streak. He, in a lower league, in like an invitational competition, he takes down the guy that took down Bushwhacker, who had the longest all-time streak to start his career, 42-0. Of course, that was long before that, but J.B. Mauney was the guy that took him down, and so now, amongst the other world champions that have been taken down by Mickey Mouse through this time, he's got that one particular monkey off his back. In 2015, at the Ty Murray Invitational, he has what becomes like his most kind of mythical performance. There are sometimes formats of these invitationals where rather than being randomly matched up with the Cowboys, they go in like a draft order essentially determined by their standings coming into it. And going into this, J.W. Harris, the guy who had gotten that 7.47 time before, declared, like said out loud, Mickey Mouse is around when it's my pick, I'm taking that bull. Everyone at this point wants to be the first guy to take down Mickey Mouse. Like, everyone wants a shot at the champ. He's taken down at this point 12 world champions, a couple of them like multiple times, but 12 of his wins are against world champions. Almost a third of his wins to start his undefeated career are against world champions. So J.W. Harris, feeling cocky, he goes for it. Henry's a little nervous. Marlene Henry is a little nervous knowing that like J.W. Harris has seen some of the moves that this bull brings. Out of the tube, Mick makes this strong left move, like a full just plant of his left leg, before making a little kind of shimmy juke with the right foot and going entirely vertical with the hind legs. In a split second from this A-frame pose, the hind legs are up in the air. J.W. Harris's rope arm is completely crumpled. He does not have a straight arm anymore, so he has no lock on it. And as soon as Mick comes down and lowers his left shoulder again, J.W. Harris's ass is on the ground. It finishes in 2.97 seconds. He gets a 47 for this. Again, it's a 47 out of 50. That is the highest score of this entire competition. It ends up being the highest score awarded for the entire 2015 season.
I love how it's set up as this epic matchup, and just immediately it's like you think you're ready for the final boss,
yeah,
and then the final boss takes you out in like 3 hits, and you're like, oh shit, I need to go get some more skills. I need to get a little better.
Yeah,
stand a chance in my current form.
So way back in the day, in like the 90s when PBR was starting up, there was about a 75% successful completion of your rate. It's down to about 35 PBR wide now. So bulls do knock people on their ass most of the time. But in 8 seconds, a bull probably gets about 3 full moves. To get off on the first move when you are being called out by a guy that almost beat you before, that's some pro shit.
How do they stop the bull after 8 seconds?
As soon as the guy gets off the back, the bull stops. The breeding of these bulls is they are just getting something off their back. They're not any more vicious than, some of them are. Bodacious was the meanest motherfucking bull in history. Bodacious was a mean bull. But most of them, like, as soon as someone's off their back, they go into the escape chute, no problem.
How does the rider get off the back after 8? Because wouldn't the bull still be bucking after the 8 seconds are up?
Yeah, no, he slides off and runs. This is a dangerous sport.
That was what I was going to say, because, like, I get, if you lose, you're on the ground. But if you're winning, you still
get on the ground at some point. Yeah.
Okay.
So he's got 2 more competitions in 2015 that he's going to do. They are 15-15 competitions. They're a little bit more informal. Still BFTS, Built for Tough Series. But they are 15 bulls and 15 riders rather than 35 and 35. In one of those in April, Marlene Henry sees him come out the chute, and there's just some awkwardness to the gate. So she takes him to Texas A&M Veterinary Hospital. They find that there is a small fracture in his back. They use acupuncture to heal this. Use these needles to try and heal the back fracture of this bull because, frankly, with the percentage muscle that they have, it is difficult to do any other kind of surgery. So they kind of have to hope that will work. And they're, at that point, expected to return by the end of the season. So goes back to Brownsboro, Texas, training with Kevin Ludemy. And by July, Marlene Henry and Kevin Ludemy have been able to see that something's still off. They take it into a local doctor, this time at College Station, who confirms that there is a lesion on the back that is likely caused by a tumor, ultimately stemming from that back fracture. So this lymphoma is the reason that on August 11th, Marlene Henry makes the difficult decision and the announcement. She's putting down the already beloved bull at the age of 7, right in its athletic prime. Typically, a bull can go from the ages of like 3 to 12, maybe even 13. So this is cut down in the prime of its time. She says, I don't care if he was number 1 in the PBR books. He was to me. He can go to the Rainbow Bridges and be fat and sassy. And his final career, 4 seasons, finishes with only 34. Everyone is certain, though, absolutely would have been able to do it. Might have etched name in the record books forever. 6-0 in all their levels, so 40 total bucks. Never once defeated, but only 34 officially for that streak at the Built Ford Tough Series. At this point, Asteroid, Bushwhacker, Bodacious, all of those guys are already in the Brand of Honor, which is the ring of honor that exists in the PBR Hall of Fame specifically for bulls. Every bull that could hold a candle to Mickey Mouse's brief but still illustrious career has already been inducted. So it's only a matter of time before Mickey Mouse gets in. Marlene Henry did not get another bull after this. This was the only bull for her. It was the only one she ever had space in for her heart, so she's happily moved on. Kevin Ludemy did have 2 sons of our boy Mickey Mouse. They were House of Mouse and MJ for Mick Jr. Both made a couple appearances in 2016. Yeah, neither really kind of pans out. But nonetheless, Mickey Mouse, an absolutely beloved athlete who was taken from us all too soon, destined to be one of the all-time greats. Still, I think, if you go pound for pound in terms of career length and career duration, one of the all-time great bulls in this beautiful sport. That is my guy this week, Mickey Mouse.
So it's tough with the tragic ending, but absolutely dominant while in his career. And also, so the thing that, I didn't say it right at the start because you kind of dove right into it, but as we are doing Remember That Guy, and it's the Hall of Guy, guy is like an old term for a bull, right? I probably have been told that at some point, but I certainly wasn't thinking of it. At 1,000,000%. I know that because so in the last season of BoJack, spoiler alert if you guys never watched, but Diane ends up getting with a bull, and the bull's name is Guy. That caused me to then look up like, they do animal puns, and yeah, Guy is like an old-fashioned term for a bull. So already bonus points for me. No,
it's just so quintessentially Texas.
It is. No, it's perfectly Texas, and struck down in his prime. Like, I'm trying to think, like, as a Flyers fan, like, I think of Pele Lindbergh had his car accident when he was in the prime of his career as a Flyers goalie. I mean, you had Len Bias was when he was drafted. That's not really in the middle of his career.
I mean, we've had any number of baseball players with automobile accidents recently. Jose Fernandez, honestly.
Right, that might be it's weird to say best when we're talking about athletes being struck down in the prime of their career. Most apt is a lot better way to say that, but yeah, R.I.P. Mickey Mouse. Mick.
Just Mick. Yeah, if we're not saying the whole thing, it's just Mick.
Just Mick.
The E did not stand for anything. I could not find any like story which was like, yeah, the E is entertainment.
I was gonna say it didn't stand for entertainment. It's sad.
Well, I've thrown down the gauntlet, Diaz, but I believe in you. 40 people have tried to beat Mickey Mouse. Maybe you're gonna be the first person to do it.
Listen, undefeated streaks are meant to be broken. Nobody's ever gone their whole career without taking one loss. And the guy I'm going to talk about took a few losses in his career, but always took him with a big smile on his face, usually a smart-ass remark as well. And I'm building off of who I talked about last week. So I mentioned in passing last week when doing the Buster Douglas story that he once fought a guy who shares a name with the current NFL wide receiver, Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb, the boxer's nickname, is Tex. So naturally, my first thought was, maybe this guy's from Texas. And wouldn't you know it, Randall Tex Cobb is about as Texas as it gets. And he was a name that I've always known as a boxing fan, but I never dove deep on. This might be the most interesting heavyweight in the history of professional boxing. This is an absolute, not just Texas guy, he's a great boxing guy, and even becomes a Philly guy at a certain point. But we're focusing on Texas. We'll start from the beginning. Randall Tex Cobb, born May 7th, 1950. He's born in a small town of just under 10,000 people called Bridge City, Texas. About 100 miles east of Houston. But he doesn't spend his childhood there. He moves to Abilene, where he grows up, goes to high school there. As you can guess with just about any athletic boy who is born in Texas, he's going to play football. So he plays 3 years varsity for Abilene High, plays for the football team. Wants to stay home at first, so he goes to Abilene Christian University as a freshman. But by the time he gets through 1 year of college, he realizes this school thing really isn't for me. So he decides to drop out to begin karate training. This is his first introduction into combat sports. Now, Tex is a real humble young man at this point, and he's going to do whatever it takes to prove his worth in whatever he's doing. When he shows up to the dojo on the first day, he says, hey, I don't really have the money to pay for a membership. What can I do to get some training here? He said, if you want to clean the mats and you want to wash the robes and you want to basically do all the bitch work around here, we can get you a few lessons. He has no problem agreeing to that. Dives right into it, and he sticks with it long enough that he earns his black belt in pretty short order. But here's the thing with Tex. Now, he played football, the violent sport, and with karate, he's learning the disciplines, he's learning philosophies, he's learning the moves. What he's not getting to do is to actually fight people. And Tex wants to hit some people, and he wants to get hit. So he decides to parlay these experiences into kickboxing. Kickboxing is not a huge thing in America at this point, but it's big enough that there's, not just professional ranks, there's amateur ranks. Tex is pretty dominant as a kickboxer, actually, at least on an amateur level. So his 9 amateur fights, he goes 9-0 with 9 knockouts. And a man by the name of Paul Kleinite notices this young man and says, we might have something here. So he asks him if he wants to turn professional. He says, sure, I didn't even know you could do this professionally, but why not? So he decides to go pro. And his first fight is actually the first ever professional kickboxing event in El Paso, Texas.
Here's a question actually I have when you're saying professional kickboxing. Like, how divided is fighting outside of boxing at this point? Like, is there kickboxing distinct from MMA, distinct from anything else?
So boxing absolutely dominates the landscape to the point that I would say, like, the comparison I would make Boxing at this time is the NFL, and then you have the CFL, you have Arena League, but by far, the primary attraction is boxing. Whereas today, it's more of a 50-50 split, probably. The two things that Tex is really known for in this professional kickboxing career to start is A, his hands are heavy, B, his chin might be even heavier with the amount of punishment he's able to take. So, combined with his big personality, Paul Kleinite thinks maybe boxing would be better off for this kid. He starts training locally in El Paso, and it's very rudimentary. He doesn't really have a good training setup. They're literally just watching videos of some of the great boxers of this time. So we're talking late 60s, early 70s. Joe Louis, watching a lot of Joe Louis film.
Okay.
And, of course, before you go pro, we need to see how you do as an amateur. Tex actually starts 0-2 as an amateur boxer. Paul realizes the tools may not be here in El Paso for us to turn Tex into the fighter that we know he can be. So instead, he calls in a favor. He has a friend up in Philadelphia who can get Tex connected with Joe Frazier. Tex actually goes up to Philadelphia, joins Joe Frazier's gym, and trains at Joe Frazier's gym for the majority of his boxing career. And this is kind of where the raw clay that is Tex Cobb as a boxer at this point is able to be molded, forged in the fire, and turned into one of the most entertaining characters in boxing history. On January 19th, 1977, he makes his professional debut against Pedro Vega and makes very quick work. He's back in El Paso for this fight, and he gets a first-round TKO victory. This is the first of 14 consecutive victories by knockout to begin his professional career. So he goes to 14-0, all knockouts. His 15th fight is against a man by the name of Roy Wallace. Roy is the first one to go the distance with Tex, but he still loses a not very close unanimous decision. It's back on the knockout streak in his next fight against Robert Eccles, and this is to put him at 16-0 with 15 career knockouts. At this point, he's caught enough attention that he's going to start getting some of those more serious fights, the same way we talked about Buster last week. You fight around locally, you fight some mid-level guys, you prove yourself enough, now you're going to get a chance at one of the big dogs. He doesn't get to fight necessarily the biggest big dogs of this time, which is, of course, George Foreman, Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, Larry Holmes. Doesn't get to fight any of these guys quite yet. Who he does get to fight is a guy by the name of Ernie Shavers. Now, Ernie Shavers is not very well known on a mass scale to the general fans of the sport, but any diehard boxing fan would tell you Ernie Shavers is perhaps the hardest hitting heavyweight of all time, even over Mike Tyson. Wasn't necessarily as skilled as those first guys I mentioned, like Ali, Frazier, Foreman, Holmes. Not necessarily on their skill level. But if you get caught by Ernie, he's a hard-hitting motherfucker. Had two nicknames. The first being the Black Destroyer, and the second being the Puncher of the Century. Kind of Mike Tyson before Mike Tyson, because Ernie, in a similar way, not as short as Tyson, but he's only 6 foot.
Puncher of the Century is a nuts title. That's a really big title to get if you are not, like, defeating Muhammad Ali while he's around.
Puncher of the Century at the same time that George Foreman also. I mean, and Foreman hit harder than Ali and Frazier.
Thank you. Please, correct me if I say anything stupid about fighting.
No. You're right. But no, George Foreman, of those big three of that late 70s, early 80s, Foreman was the biggest hitter.
Good to know.
And he's got nothing on Ernie. Ernie fought twice for the heavyweight title. September 29th, 1977, he loses a unanimous decision to Muhammad Ali. It was 144 to 141 on both judges' scorecards. The ref scored it 145 to 141 because at this time, those were the three who scored the fight. Fun fact, Ava Shane was the first woman to judge a professional heavyweight title fight in that fight. She was one of the ones to score at 144 and 141. But this was a really close fight. The New York Times official scorecard had it even at 7 rounds apiece with one tied round. So just 2 years before he fights Tex, Ernie puts up a very good fight against Muhammad Ali. Just 5 months before he fought Tex, he had a shot for the heavyweight title. When he fought Larry Holmes, he did lose this fight. I was TKO'd in the 11th round. So Ernie's gotten 2 shots at the title, fought very admirably in both of them, was not able to bring it home, but now he's one of those gatekeepers again, if Tex is able to put up a good showing here, Tex enters the national conversation. Tex really just makes an exhibition of it. He's getting hit very clean by Ernie, but again, showing that he's unfazed, willing to take any amount of punishment, laughing it off. At one point, Ernie hits him hard. Tex does what you do in boxing. You grab on a little bit, and he whispers in Ernie's ear as they're in close, "Is that all you got?"
You have a penchant for getting fighters that just get smacked in the face and take it.
Yeah, Ricardo Mayorga wishes he was Tex Cobb. I'll just say that. But Shavers is never shaken by this. Tex would even say later on, reflecting upon his career, Ernie Shavers is the hardest hitting guy I was ever in the ring with. So if you find a guy that can hit harder than Ernie, you better give me a gun, because that's the only way I'm going to have a chance. But on this night, they only use their fists, and with that, Tex gets a TKO knockout victory in round 8. 3 less rounds than it took Larry Holmes just 5 months earlier. And now Tex is on that national stage. He's going to get some big-time fights. His next 2 are very tough fights for him. Coming off the knockout over Shavers, he fights against Ken Norton. Ken Norton is a former heavyweight champion at this point, fairly recently. Ken Norton beat Muhammad Ali, actually had a trilogy with Ali where the 3rd fight went to Ali. A lot of people will tell you that Norton won that fight. So no shame in going the distance and losing a tough split decision. So one judge does rule in favor of Tex. The other 2 give it to Ken Norton. And this marks the first loss of his career. His next fight, he fights a man who would be a future heavyweight champion, named Michael Dokes. Michael is one of the sad stories in boxing history. As I said, did become a heavyweight champion, but ultimately had difficulties with a crack cocaine addiction that led to his career kind of falling apart. But at this point in 1981, he's clean, and he and Tex fight, and this time Tex loses a majority decision. So 2 of the cards go to Dokes. The 3rd was ruled even, but with the 2 of 3, this counts as now a second loss. Now 17-2, but he bounces back pretty well, wins his next 2 fights, and he's set up for a 3rd fight in January of 1982. But before January of 1982 is December of 1981. And there's an incident that happens that causes a minor delay in his career. So as I mentioned, Tex trains at Joe Frazier's gym in Philadelphia. He resides in the Grays Ferry section, and he's at a bar with a reporter for the Philadelphia Daily News by the name of Pete Dexter. Pete and Tex kind of developed this kinship. Tex always jokes, "I have the second most pointless job in America, and the person who has the most pointless job in America is you, Pete, because you write about what I do, and what I do doesn't matter." Like that's kind of his sense of humor. He's a real ball buster, but there's a kinship here. They're friends, so not even for a story, they're at a local bar. And it's important to know that, as you both understand somewhat as outsiders of Philadelphia, relatively speaking, Xavier, I know you live here now. James, I know you went to school here. But Philadelphians can be very rude and not accepting, especially not only of each other, but of outsiders.
Absolutely.
We've all heard plenty of stories of, if you show up to an Eagles-Cowboys game wearing a Cowboys jersey, you might not have the best time. All these things. I think some of that stuff's exaggerated, but even I need to concede, Philadelphians have an attitude problem sometime.
I just want to state for the record, having been an away fan at a Flyers game, having been an away fan at a Phillies game, and having been an away fan at an Eagles game, Flyers game by far the most times that I was called a faggot.
Interesting. I did not have an issue.
By a wide margin.
Although I guess I was with Alexa, so maybe that deflected. So because I definitely was wearing Rangers gear, I believe, at that game.
Me and my Vancouver jersey, nope, they were throwing that around like it was a hot potato.
I like the Flyers. I am a Flyers fan. But the people that have the Flyers as their favorite team, or especially their only team in Philadelphia, these are the people that liked Frank Rizzo. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yep.
Interpret that as you will.
The complexion of the team still pleases them.
But, all right, I'm not going to say anything that's going to be bad.
We digress.
We digress. Philadelphians don't like outsiders. They especially don't like outsiders from Texas, as I mentioned, bringing up the Cowboys. And they don't think Tex Cobb's anything special. They don't like that this guy came from Texas to train in Philadelphia. They don't think Joe Frazier should be giving him the time of day. I mean, basically, they're saying, any halfway decent South Philly fighter would kill that bum. And word gets around on this night that Tex is at a bar in Grays Ferry, and people start showing up. They're not just showing up with their fists, they're showing up with tire irons and baseball bats. Now, Tex, in his typical self-deprecating fashion, looks at Pete as he sees these people gathering. He knows why they're here. And he says, I hope that's the softball team. That comment does not sit well with these people who have come armed with baseball bats. So at first, in any situation where you're going to try to beat up two people, you're going to take out the weaker one first. So Pete gets knocked out pretty quickly by one of these baseball bats. And Pete, in recounting the story, just remembers being knocked out. And the first thing he remembers upon waking up is hearing Tex yelling, if he's dead, then you're all dead. 6'3", 240 Tex Cobb with his black belt is able to hurt and fight off enough of these people wielding bats and tire irons that they do eventually disperse. They get away. Pete has a broken hip. Among other things, he's not able to walk. Tex broke his arm. And the only reason he broke his arm is because, of course, taking a defensive posture against the bats, he's going to catch one right across. And with the adrenaline going, still able to throw that hand and get his moves off. But eventually, a broken bone is a broken bone, and it does need to be treated. So he takes 5 months off to recover. And when he comes back, he's scheduled for a fight with Jeff Shellberg, who he gets a TKO over in the 7th round. So perhaps the Philly bar fights even help him to further refine his skills. You're able to fight 25 guys with a bat. You can fight one guy with 2 fists in a Patches O'Houlihan kind of way.
It's resistance training.
You make the practice harder, and then when you get to the real thing, it's going to be a little easier. Coming off of this now, he's won 3 in a row. There's no doubts about how his arm's holding up. It's time for Tex to get a shot. On November 26th, 1982, it's a homecoming for Tex. He goes back to the Astrodome in Houston and gets a chance to fight for the heavyweight championship of the world against Larry Holmes. And this doesn't go too well for Tex. I'm not even going to try to build up like it's going to be this great dramatic fight. He gets his fucking ass whooped for 15 rounds straight. Absolutely crushed. I mean, the big thing really is, and Tex has strong hands. He has a strong jaw. Larry Holmes has about a foot reach advantage in terms of wingspan.
Damn.
So Tex can be as tough as he wants, but if you can't get close enough to hit the guy, it's not going to be a great time. Tex has a sense of humor throughout this, though. He's still trying to talk to Larry a little bit during the fight. At one point, even, he turns to the ref and he says, "You're white, help me."
Man.
Yeah. As I understand Tex from researching him, this was a very tongue-in-cheek remark. Like, he's like, hey, I'm getting my ass kicked right now. Is basically all he's trying to say. He does go the distance, though, but it's really tough throughout, to the extent that Howard Cosell, the late, great Howard Cosell, is calling this fight for ABC Wide World of Sports. And at one point he says, I wonder if that referee understands that he's constructing an advertisement for the abolition of the very sport that he's a part of. This is really tough to watch, and it's important to remember the context that just 13 days earlier, Ray Mancini fought against Dooku Kim, and such a brutal, violent fight that Dooku Kim has to go to the hospital afterwards and unfortunately would die 4 days after that fight as a result of his brain trauma. This is already a thing that's somewhat at the forefront of people's minds, and we're seeing Tex get absolutely slaughtered in there. So, Howard Cosell, again, is he contributing to the abolition of the very sport he's a part of? He would vow after the fight that he would never call another professional bout, and he actually helped do that. This is the last professional boxing match that Howard Cosell would ever call.
That's how bad Randall Tex Cobb was?
Well, so it's not even necessarily, like, that's one thing I can say to illustrate how bad it was. The other thing I can say to illustrate it is that on 2 of the 3 scorecards, he loses all 15 rounds. There's not even one judge that's like, in the 6th, he actually did okay. No rounds. And may God have mercy on your soul. But, again, Tex is going to be Tex, right? In the post-fight afterwards, one of the first things people ask him about is, Howard Cosell said he's done with calling professional boxing after seeing how badly you were beaten tonight. And Tex says, if I eliminate heart disease, if I walk on water, I come up with a cure for crippled kids, I can't imagine a greater gift to mankind. This is my greatest accomplishment for Howard Cosell to not be calling boxing anymore.
Jeez.
Not a big Howard Cosell fan. follows it up and says, hell, I guess I'm to stop broadcasting NFL games. I'll go play football next week too. He's really
absolutely despises Howard Cosell.
Really just not a fan of Howard. He has a couple other just really fucking gems of quotes after the fight. He says, Larry never beat me. He just won the first 15 rounds. Of course, the natural follow-up to that from reporters like, all right, well, I mean, if you're saying he didn't beat you, are you interested in a rematch? And he said, oh, I think I'd like a rematch, but I don't know if Larry would want to do that. I don't think his hands could take the abuse. So I love it. Just very self-deprecating, never takes himself too seriously. Again, like while doing this, like as we said with the IndyCar, insane thing that quite literally somebody died like 13 days earlier as a result of this, and he's in here without a care in the world after just getting absolutely slaughtered by the heavyweight champion of the world. And again, he's not discouraged by any of this, right? So he comes back in his next two fights, gets consecutive, not knockouts. He's not able to secure the knockout, but it does go to distance. He gets 2 consecutive 10-round decisions. And then he decides it's time to take a break from boxing. Just regular boxing, though, because he gets an offer to jump right into the professional kickboxing ranks and get a immediate heavyweight title shot. Sport that he has not competed in about a decade at this point.
Just like a bicycle, right?
You hop right back in. I shouldn't say a decade. It's more like 5 years. At any rate, he's been professionally only worried about fists that could potentially murder him. And then he said, hey, how about we throw the feet back in and you get a shot at the heavyweight title of the world? Tex is never going to back down from a challenge. As a proper Texan, he's never going to back down. So he says, yeah, I'll take it. This ends up being broadcast live on NBC. It's the first ever national broadcast of a kickboxing championship fight. And just 2 rules that I would just want to go over about kickboxing before we talk about this fight. First of all, they do 9 2-minute rounds. I'm a fan of the odd number of rounds. That way, you're pretty heavily eliminating the chance for a draw. The other rule is that at this time, you needed to throw at least 8 kicks per round. If you threw less, it was a point deduction.
They have a per round kick quota. Okay, I could believe like a full fight kick quota. I don't think I would have known the per round kick quota.
No, I'm just imagining like corner says like 15 seconds, you only have 2 kicks, and he just starts like unwinding like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Just little chicken kicks.
No chicken kicks from Tex, and no chicken shit. He's very brave. He's taking this fight. He fights. So I love this. John Johnson was Buster's trainer, and Tex Cobb fights John Jackson for the heavyweight kickboxing title of the world. And wouldn't you know it, after 5 rounds, Tex is up on the cards. He's up 3 rounds to 2. But the one thing his body was not able to get prepared for in time is he has the muscle memory, but there's a certain stamina to throwing kicks that is just different than throwing punches. He gasses later on in this fight. He loses the last 4 rounds on all cards, and on all 3 judges' scorecards, he does lose a unanimous decision, 89-86. This could be a successful return. Maybe it sets up a rematch. He can refocus on kickboxing. But this is just a quick pop in, pop out. He fights for the title. 1 foot in the door, 1 foot right back out the door. Foots are back out of the equation because we're back to regular boxing. Gets a tune-up match in his first fight back. He gets a 10-round majority decision in the second fight back in boxing. So now, with 4 consecutive boxing victories since that defeat to Larry Holmes, this is now when he has his fight with Buster. So he loses that, which is the majority decision. Falls to 24-4, and this is unfortunately the first of 4 consecutive losses for Tex. The last of which is his only ever knockout loss. He's knocked out by a man named D. Collier at 2:33 of round number 1. Ooh. So that's, and again, like this is Tex with one of the most legendary chins in the history of boxing. So he kind of takes this as a signal that maybe I should take some time off from fighting. Takes a 2-year break before he does return to the ring, but he's thinking now, I can try to fight these elite contenders and I can get my ass kicked, or people love them some Cobb. I can fight some cans and I can get some easy knockouts and I can get adoring fans and I can make money that way. So that's the route that he chooses to go upon this return. In fact, in his first month back after this 2-year layoff, he fights 6 times between March 12th and April 7th. All 6 fights end in knockouts. Not one of these fights makes it past the second round.
I mean, that's how
No.
you pile up that mileage. You end the fight quickly, so you don't have to do it for too long.
Yeah, you're saving time from that perspective. And again, like, I want to be clear, like, ever since he got the fight with Shavers, he's fighting contenders. He's no longer fighting contenders. He is fighting guys that he knows he's going to beat.
He's turned the difficulty knob down a setting.
Exactly. Let me just play on easy and let me go on cruise control for a bit. The 7th fight is just going to be a continuation of this trend when he fights Bill Duncan. The fight starts the same way as these always do. About 17 seconds in, he rocks him with a punch. He gets knocked back into the ropes, but he's knocked back into the ropes so violently that his head then whips back forward and they headbutt each other. This opens up a nasty cut on Duncan's head that ends up requiring 17 stitches. Because this is the result of an accidental headbutt, fight is called off very quickly into the first round, and it's ruled a technical decision. Now, the Pain fans in attendance were none too happy with this, and just as with Buster in that Columbus nightclub, the fans pour into the ring, and the brawl breaks out at the fight. And people are just none too happy. But all's good for Tex. He's not the one who got the cut. Fights 3 more times over the course of the next year. He has 2 decisive knockout victories, and then has a majority decision in the 10-round fight, the first fight to go to distance since his return. But it's for a good reason. It's against Leon Spinks, who is a former heavyweight champion. It was 10 years ago at this point. But Leon Spinks beat Muhammad Ali for the heavyweight belt 10 years before this fight with Tex. Certainly no slouch. After the fight with Leon, again, he doesn't get the knockout, so he's thinking, maybe I don't necessarily have it anymore. So he does take another hiatus. This time it's a 4.5-year hiatus. This time, he has a big personality and really wants to focus on his Hollywood career. So he's appearing in some TV shows with guest appearances. Notably, he appears in Miami Vice and MacGyver. He also appears in a show which is called Fletch Lives. I've never heard of it, but I was just tickled by the name he was credited as, which is Ben Dover.
Fletch Lives, I imagine, is in some capacity a continuation of the Chevy Chase Fletch franchise. So someone named Ben Dover sounds about right.
It's very on brand. He also appears in 11 different movies over this 4.5-year stretch, including Police Academy 4, Citizens on Patrol. I haven't watched it. Couldn't tell you how Tex did in that one, but that would be the most prominent film he appears in at that time. After this break, 4.5 years off, on September 15th, 1992, he does make his return to the ring. He fights a man by the name of Sonny Barch, and this fight is, on the surface, initially, no different than any of these other fights against cans that he's had. At 1:10 of the first round, the ref stops the fight for a TKO, but this would later be overturned to a no contest, and that's for 2 reasons. The first is that there is suspicion that this fight may have been fixed. These 2 may have met before, and it might have been like, hey, listen, Sonny, I'm not going to hit you too hard, but I'm going to get the win. You're going to get a solid payday out of this too. Let's do it. So that's the first reason. And the second reason is that they both test positive after the fight for cocaine. And
do you cancel it out then? They're like, all right, well, I mean, everyone was even.
So it's not just that they both tested positive for cocaine. It's that this match fixing is somewhat corroborated by the fact that they were snorting cocaine together both before and immediately after the fight.
Cocaine doesn't stay in your system that long.
No, exactly. So, I mean, basically, they took a little break to calm down. They punched each other in the face while their faces were numb. And then they go right back and they said, all right, how about that cocaine? So this goes down as a no contest for both of those reasons. So after this, not immediately afterwards, but in reflecting on his career, Tex would say, they called me a fat, cowardly, cocaine-snorting, fight-fixing cheat. Who are they calling fat? This cocaine odyssey with Sonny Barch aside, he then fights 9 more times over the next 9 months, gets 9 more knockouts, again, all in the similar fashion. And the last of these is on June 7th, 1993, which is 1 month after he turns 43. he decides that this is a good point to go out. So he retires from professional boxing after this last victory with a professional record of 42 victories, 7 losses, with the 1 draw.
A lot of those losses in, from what it sounds like, a very dense period.
Yeah, it was essentially, he got to the point where he realized, I'm good enough to beat everybody who's not a contender, but I'm not necessarily good enough to beat many people who are contenders.
A quad A boxer.
Right. With the A+ chin and A+ fist, but like C- agility and like movement and whatnot. So essentially, if we're playing EA Sports Fight Night and we're doing Madden attributes, his chin's a 99, his power's a 95, his quickness is like a 50. That's essentially where we're at. And also his defense is just very low too, because when you have an amazing chin, why would I waste time learning defense? I don't care if I get hit. It's somewhat the Tex philosophy. After retiring, he continues to appear in film. Some of his notable movie appearances, he appeared in Ace Ventura as Gruffman, and in Naked Gun 33.5 as Big Harry Khan. He also appears as Skull in Liar Liar. So, some classic 90s films that Tex managed to make an appearance in. Also appears in some classic 90s to early 2000s television shows. He was in 2 episodes of Walker, Texas Ranger, and also in X-Files. So,
was the X-Files episode set in Texas?
It was titled Fight Club. So
okay, so he at least knows what he's talking about in it.
Right. I mean, he is almost, as many actors have an archetype, Tex's archetype is just like evil dickhead. Is kind of his archetype.
Rough man, so to speak.
Rough man, exactly. Big Harry Khan. But that's all to say for his film career. But there is one more postscript that I want to mention. After training in Philadelphia, to this day, he continues to reside in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And in 2009, he actually graduated from Temple University, magna cum laude, with a degree in sports and recreation management. Just shy of his 60th birthday, just after his 59th. He gets a degree from Temple. Speaking to the press after his graduation, he said, "It was nice to have that opportunity to wear a robe, to step up there, and not have to worry about bleeding." So that is the story of Tex Cobb, a trailblazer and a cowboy in his own right. Just a couple more quotes that he said throughout his career that I just kind of want to go out on. The first being, "All I do is hit somebody in the mouth. It's a whole lot easier than working for a living. I don't make anything noble out of what I do." The next being, "I've always thought the greatest crime a man can do is take himself too seriously. I mean, something like fighting is pretty ridiculous to take seriously. What I do is hit people. I'm not promoting anything that is real or valuable." But the best quote that I can send out on, to portray him again as the everyman, not just of Texas, but of boxing. In reference to Don King, he said, "He has screwed everybody he's ever been around. Hog, dog, or frog, it don't matter to Don. If you got a quarter, he wants the first 26 cents.
Don King's a dick. That's good.
So, look, he's a straight shooter. He's never braggadocious. He's never self-promoting. He's always honest, often self-deprecating, and always Tex. Who can be more Texan than the man named Tex himself? Tex Cobb. That's my guy."
He's a great guy. Definitely, he's my number 1 Randall Cobb now. I can safely say that.
Wow.
I have no
statement.
attachment to Randall Cobb. I don't give a fuck about Randall Cobb. I care about Randall Cobb. But Randall Cobb? Bleh.
Fair. No, you don't mess with Tex.
But also, you don't mess with the bull or you get the horns.
That's a good segue into our conversation. I mean, it's tough for me because, Xavier, no offense to JR, I am immediately between Mick and Tex.
I totally get that. My only thing is, did the bull graduate from Temple University? I don't think so.
Oh, I'm sorry, wait, are we saying that a very Texas thing to do is to go have a second home and second life in Philadelphia and get a degree from Philadelphia?
Yes, it is.
They both start TE. I'm just saying, there's some similarities there. Like, he is a transplant to Philadelphia at a certain point, but I would still say he's a Texan at heart the whole time.
No, it does not disqualify him.
Of course. And just this snorting cocaine right before a fight with your opponent thing is just so good. It's so good. And the
dedication to fighting. Just I have to be hitting things.
Not just hitting things. He needs to be hit at the same time. Like he by all accounts loves receiving just as much as he loves giving. It's incredible.
As long as it's all consensual.
Listen, 2 willing participants in a 15-foot by 15-foot ring. Let them do what they want.
And I could say the same about a rider and the beautiful beast. I think the question is, if we can just say that a bull's a guy, I will hear you if you tell me, like, hey, we can't do animals. I think an animal should count, but that's really your only argument against Mickey Mouse.
I was going to say a bull isn't a guy until Diaz said that a bull is literally a guy, which might be enough of a, it only works this one time thing.
Did Diaz accidentally shoot himself in the foot by revealing that fact?
But I'm still hesitant because it's a bull.
It's tough, and I mean, like, honestly, I'm with Tex, and James, I assume you're Mick. So
I think Randall Tex Cobb blew me away a lot more than I expected. As I said, number 1 Randall Cobb. It was pretty good. If the category was we were trying to find like the most Texas thing that we could, there is a lot of Philadelphia in there. There's a lot of Philadelphia.
There's hints of Philadelphia. There's little sprinklings.
There's a college degree.
Listen, there's a Joe Frazier here. There's a Temple University there.
And there's just a dusting of cocaine all atop it.
Exactly. It's like, what is it, Hansel and Gretel? They leave the breadcrumbs. It's just leaving little dime bags the whole way from Abilene to Philadelphia.
Just powdered sugar on the cake of life.
Follow the white brick road.
Oh my god. I definitely enjoyed Tex more, but again, Diaz acted against his own interest by saying that bulls are guys, and we have precedent on going for anything that uses guy in the actual story.
Okay,
are you citing Mike McGee? Are you going?
Yes,
to
I am citing Mike McGee.
But we're saying Texas, and this dude's name is Tex.
I got a bull that competed in rodeos. I taught you guys about professional bull riding.
No, this is true. And I mean, I'm a yes on animals being able to be in the Hall of Guy. I'm a yes on that because
there's been a while where I've been trying to find is there a racing horse I could fit in? I really got excited when you said Texas and it finally occurred to me oh, forget about a horse. Let's get some bulls up in here.
No, I would say you probably can't do Secretariat. There's certainly horses that I would want to do a deep dive on. I would do a deep dive on Barbaro, whose owners are literally from my hometown, and my hometown is 1,000 people. So that's
Barbaro
insane.
got whooped by Seabiscuit, man.
No, Barbaro got whooped by his broken bone that led to him being put down. That's what he got whooped by.
That's brutal.
A healthy Barbaro I put up against anybody. The same as you put a healthy Mick up against anybody. Tragically flawed athletes.
Truly, meant to be one of the greatest of all time and robbed of that opportunity. I really loved finding out that everybody else owns, dozens of bulls in these competitions, except for Marlene Henry, who only owns this one.
I do want to say, this is, maybe a little morbid to say about Mick. The same way that, I worry about Zion's knees because I think he's too fucking heavy. I wonder what role that might have played in Mick.
There are heavier
I'm just speaking out loud.
There are
heavier ones.
Yeah, he was not top of the weight class. I mean, there are people heavier than Aaron Donald and Myles Garrett, but there's no one in that weight class that can move the way that they move.
Right. Yeah, I mean, listen, between James and I, it's deadlocked. So Xavier, it's going to come down to you.
All right. You know what? I as much as I like Tex, it is the Temple stuff and his Philadelphia things that made me laugh the most, which goes against the spirit of this topic, even if I love it. So purely because of the commitment to the topic, I have to go with Mick E getting sued by Disney if I finish the rest. So, James, congratulations.
Look, this isn't about congratulating me. Diaz, I'll let you take care of the congratulations.
Listen, I would say it's bullshit. That feels too on the nose for who our winner is. So instead, I will give a begrudging congratulations to perhaps the most singularly dominant bull in the history of professional bull riding. Struck down in the prime of his career, but forever living both in our hearts and in our hall of Guy. Welcome, Mick E. Mouse. Oh, to the hall of Guy.
Indeed.
And that is just the way I laugh sometimes. And if any executives from any 6-letter companies are listening, fuck off. We don't have any assets as a podcast anyway.
We have absolutely nothing. This is all fair use.
Unless you want to hire us to be on your network. In which case, this is sports related, so...
In which case, I will gladly extol the virtues of all the things that you do. If you're paying me, I agree with all of them. Anyway, we digress. Congratulations, Mick.
Congratulations to Mick. I just wanted to add 2 last things about kind of like bull riding, frankly. First off, I would highly recommend anyone that enjoyed that story in the slightest look up Silvano Alves, the Brazilian champion. There's been a lot of Brazilian champions, but he, by what I've looked at so far, does the most interviews. It's really cool finding out about kind of that part of it. I also want to talk about one that I couldn't get in because this bull wasn't as much of a champion, but there is a bull named Panhandle Slim. And the reason Panhandle Slim is interesting is because when Panhandle Slim died, they made 6 clone embryos, 4 made it to viability, and those 4 bulls, whose names are I'm Back, Mr. Slim, another one, and Slim's Ghost, those are all now professionally competitive bulls that are identical genetically and clones of a previous bull. Bull riding is wild, and I'm so glad that I learned as much as I did about it this week, and I'm so glad that we have chosen to so honor Mickey Mouse. And that's all I've got. No more BS. I've been James.
I've possibly been Xavier, or maybe a clone of Xavier. Who knows?
I'm certainly the real Diaz, and as we say each and every week on this podcast, this hall ain't big enough for the 2 of us guys.
Great Texas.
Just a game.